Welcome back, my Be Health Empowered family, to another episode of Excuse Me, Doctor. My name is Dr. Melissa Clark. Please call me Dr. Mel. I am delighted to be here with you again this Monday. And thank you so much for tuning in. Whether you're with us on Facebook, YouTube, or SiriusXM HUR Voices 141. And do me a favor, if you're listening online and you haven't done this yet, and this is for my old heads as well as my newbies, please hit that like button on Facebook. And if you're on YouTube, please hit that red button called subscribe. Really appreciate you for it. And, also, we are here specifically to make sure that you have the information that you need to make wise health decisions for yourself, for your family, and even for your community. So, to that end, we always ask you, make sure that you put your comments and your questions in the chat as we're going along, because we're pulling from those. We are going to answer your questions right here live as we cover the topics that we have tonight. And to do that, I have to have my two fantastic co-hosts who always bring in your questions, always bring the word from the street, always let me know what you're thinking. And where are they? Are they coming on? Mr. Wayne Bruce.
You got to say
Bria
the name,
Good.
Dr. Mel. You holding back. You have to say the name, Dr. Mel.
Well, come on in.
You could be calling anybody in. You know,
Look,
so many people.
You know, Wayne
so
Bruce needs he needs a grand introduction.
Right, exactly. We really need a drum roll right there, Mr. Producer.
You know,
I'm just saying. Yeah. So
Dr. Mel,
anyway, how y'all doing?
I'm cool.
Much better.
So much better. All right. We didn't want to say.
We missed you last week.
We missed you last week. We didn't want to say why.
Yeah.
But you were a little under the weather.
And you look wonderful.
You look fantastic.
You know, it's the after disease look. You know, you just blow a little bit and you get some rest.
Rest. You said like an old woman. That's rest.
Some rest.
Rest. Well, we are glad that you are well rested and ready to go, because we have a big show today.
I'm excited, Dr. Mel. As you could tell, everybody out there, I'm not in my normal place of, not in my normal studio. So the studio is taking on a renovation. So I am in a new, exciting.
You're under a bridge. It looks like.
It's where I live. A bridge. Right. It's where I live. It's a good record. It's a good record.
And for those listening and not watching, Wayne's background looks like it's the 14th Street Bridge in DC or something. I don't know.
No, that's the Memorial Bridge.
Memorial Bridge. I knew it was one of those. Memorial Bridge in DC.
Dr. Mel.
Okay.
A bridge nonetheless.
You have to know.
Yeah, that's right. Because that's the Kennedy Center in the background. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I got you.
Or as the young people say, yes.
Exactly. Well, good. Well, what y'all know what we're talking about tonight, right?
Yeah. It's right out of the headlines of the latest news. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Procedures done overseas and medical tourism.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and a lot of people it's a trend that seems like it's on the rise. We decided to cover it tonight because everybody might have seen that story on CNN where 4 individuals from the United States went to Mexico, one of whom was going to get a cosmetic surgery procedure, and they got robbed, and 2 individuals, I think that's why the motive for the crime, but 2 people were killed, and 2 people returned to the United States safely. But, it raises questions like, is it safe to go out of the country for medical procedures? And if you are going to do it, is there a way to do it safely and wisely? So, we're all about navigating the healthcare system here. Make sure that you're empowered with the right information. So when it comes to medical tourism, boom, we're going to cover it tonight. And we have 2 fantastic guests too.
Right. I'm excited, Dr. Mel. Yep. But you know what happens before that?
What's that?
We have to recap the latest and greatest in health and wellness.
All right. Let's do it.
So here we go. First off, Dr. Mel, I think the nail is in the coffin of the ivermectin myth.
Well, yes. And, for people who don't know or didn't come across it, ivermectin was a medication that people were claiming cured COVID. It's used in horses as a deworm medicine. It's used in humans to treat parasite diseases, but we know COVID isn't a parasite. And it's a virus. So this was done last year, big study, where they looked at high dose ivermectin for 6 days and compared it with a sugar pill and placebo. And it was the most rigorous kind of study that you can do, double blind, randomized, placebo control. I mean, this is the gold standard of how you're supposed to do science. And they found that the length of time for recovery from COVID in people given ivermectin was the exact same as people who got placebo or sugar pill, right?
Look,
11 days.
look,
So
that must
ivermectin,
be sweet. That's a sweet result.
well, I mean, I just hope that it finally, like I said, puts a nail in the coffin. I mean, my colleagues in emergency medicine and in the ICU were getting cussed out and hit and, all kinds of stuff because they refused to prescribe ivermectin to people who somehow picked it up on the internet that this was something that was good for COVID. Well,
Oh wow.
there is no science behind it. And the medical profession, hospital workers were getting abused when they refused to prescribe it. So I'm hoping, like I said, that this ends it, stops it in its tracks in terms of going any further.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
let that be a sweet ending.
That it works no better than a sugar pill.
That it was no better. So it might be better off taking some equal, some aspartame, whatever. But don't take
No.
ivermectin.
We don't push those either.
We
but
don't push those.
yeah.
It's a joke, Dr. Mel. There's got to be
You know
some
what?
humor on the show.
The
That's all I
the
provide.
Paxlovid works though. Paxlovid works very well.
Yes, it does.
Right.
Yes, it does.
Yes, it does.
Absolutely.
Oh,
And there is science behind that.
evidence, very much evidence. So let's talk about Narcan and buying that over the counter. So I've heard of Narcan, but could you explain a little bit what it is to the viewers and how it might be very, very important to the epidemic that we're in right now in the US?
Yeah. So you mentioned we're in an epidemic. We are in an epidemic, and I'll get to that in a bit, around fentanyl and opioid overdoses. But Narcan is an antidote. When given in the form of a nasal spray in the field, outside of the hospital, it works. It helps people wake up from the sedating effects that make you sleep and eventually stop you from breathing. And that's how fentanyl and other opioids work in terms of killing people. It reverses those effects and wakes people up. And so this week, the FDA voted unanimously for Narcan to be available over the counter without a prescription because it is safe and effective. So that's good news. The more access we have to it, the more it can be used in the settings where it's needed.
That's awesome. So what does this have to do with the opioid crisis? Because this is huge for it, right?
Yeah. Well, we know more than 1 million people have died from drug overdoses in the past couple of decades. And opioid deaths are on the rise. I mean, every day we open up the newspaper, we hear about fentanyl um, lacing all kinds of street drugs, pills that are made, illicit pills like Percocet and oxycodone and OxyContin. And there's been a 17% increase in deaths from 2020 to 2021, especially among teens. So if Narcan is given in a suspected overdose and it works like it should, you should still call 911 even if the person wakes up, because it only works for a short time. And so if you don't get them to medical attention, the medication that they took to make them sleepy and depress their breathing in the first place might kick in later. So they should always be evaluated by a medical professional.
Yeah, I remember us learning about it in college when I was working as a health peer educator at the University of Maryland. But why was it not available over the counter at first? Did it have any like bad side effects or something?
No, well, it's safe and effective, essentially. I think the fear was, like I said, that people would use it and then go on their merry way and not get a medical evaluation. But once you've gotten to the point where you need Narcan, there are changes that can happen in your lung, there are changes that can happen in your brain. And like I said, the
Mm.
medication that you took in the first place may have a longer half-life, so meaning it may stay in your system longer than the Narcan does, so you end up falling back asleep. So I think that was the concern, but I think evidence has shown that it's better that people have access to it to save lives.
Harm reduction.
Harm
Yeah,
reduction, you got it.
harm reduction. Will it be a cost to it, Dr. Mill?
Yeah, it depends. I think if there are programs in that area to cover it, but that's a great question. And I
Okay.
think it depends on your local municipality.
All right. Well, we're going to switch the subject. And I hate to start off the subject like this, but yippee ki uh, it's one of my favorite lines from one of my favorite
From
movies,
Die Hard, mine
Die
too.
Hard. Die
Yeah.
Hard. And I bring it up because the next subject is pretty hard for us to fathom. That they announced that Bruce Willis has frontal temporal dementia.
Mhm.
Dr.
Yeah.
Mel, explain to us what's going on here.
So, frontotemporal dementia, it's a rare condition, and it usually shows up earlier in life than other dementias. So, like in your 50s, as opposed to Alzheimer's dementia or Lewy body dementia that's associated with Parkinson's disease, which show up later, like in your 60s, 70s, 80s. And it basically affects the front part of your brain and the temporal part of your brain, the sides of your brain, which are generally associated with your personality, how you express yourself, your behavior, and your ability to process language and to speak. So you might have heard that a few months ago he was diagnosed with aphasia, which means loss of the ability to speak. So that
Mm.
was the first manifestation of this disease in him, and presumably it's progressed. And unfortunately, there's no cure yet. But it's still important, obviously, if you have signs of memory loss, behavior change, to seek care immediately because there are actually reversible causes of dementia. So, getting to care and not just assuming that it's old age or some other reason,
Right.
so that you can get a workup and determine, do you have potentially a treatable cause of dementia?
Remember, they thought Chris Christopherson had dementia, and it turned out to be
Yeah.
Lyme's disease.
It's treatable.
Treatable. All right.
All right. So, kind of on a similar wavelength, but a little different. Let's switch over to Alzheimer's. So, I read a lot about Mediterranean diets, right, and how good they are in a lot of different ways. But how is this related to a mind diet? And also, how does this help people with Alzheimer's or potentially help the onset of Alzheimer's?
Sure. So the Mediterranean diet and the mind diet are pretty similar, but there was a study looking at both of them and how they affected the onset of Alzheimer's dementia. What they did was they studied people, unfortunately, who had died, and they looked at their brains and they saw that people who had used the Mediterranean diet or the mind diet, their brains looked 12 to 18 years younger on average than people who didn't adhere to those diets. They had almost 40% fewer of the brain changes seen with Alzheimer's disease. So, what is it about those diets? Well, they are really rich in whole grains, olive oil, and fish. Um, but the kicker are the green leafy vegetables. Those were a huge difference, and the darker the better. So collards, kale, Swiss chard, turnip greens, mustard greens, great. And then the mind diet really emphasizes berries. So five servings of berries a week. And they did allow you to eat other stuff. They allow you to have eggs, dairy, and poultry, but sort of smaller amounts during the week than we're used to in our Western diet. And then butter and other fats, red meat, sweets, and goods made from refined flour and sugar are rare in the diet. So
Mm.
that's really the key. And in case you're kind of creeped out by the autopsy study, there was a study done of nearly 6,000 healthy older Americans with an average age of about 68. And they found that those who were on the Mediterranean and the Mayan diet lowered their risk of dementia, cut it by a third. So
Oh,
it worked.
wow. So what's good for the heart is also good for the mind. I'm sure you
Yes.
had all the black folk at college, but then when you said less sugar, less red meat, less butter, they're probably like,
Yeah.
oh no, 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 that's not for me.
But you can have olive oil, right? So, I
You know
cook
that
my
ain't
eggs
butter.
I cook my eggs in olive oil. It tastes delicious. I'm just saying. Yes, it does. Ignore Wayne Bruce.
He over there.
Yeah, right. Your mic is off. Your mic is off.
Oh man.
Do you know what time it is? My mic was off. Do you know what
Thank
time it
God.
is, guys? It's time for the weekly debunk. Stopping misinformation in its tracks. So Tommy Twitter fingers hit me on a text and said, "My wife is trying to kill me. She tried to give me some Advil pills that expired 8 months ago."
Uh-oh.
So I was like, I don't know. Excuse me, Dr. Mel, is that true?
Well, there's no need for Tommy for Mr. Twitter fingers to file for divorce. Expired medication won't kill you. And it's likely that Advil probably safely could have treated his back pain. So the deal with the expiration date is drug manufacturers stamp it on, they're required by law to stamp it on bottles of medication. It's the date after which the manufacturer doesn't guarantee the full potency of the drug, but it doesn't harm you.
Okay.
And it even turned out that the FDA did this really big study, and it showed that most medications are good for an average of 5 years after the expiration date. There's some key exceptions to that, mainly antibiotics and insulin. And it's always best to stick. I mean, you're going to be safe sticking to the expiration date, but you don't have to worry like Tommy did that his wife was trying to kill him, because it won't kill you. And always check with your pharmacist when it's time to discard your medications. Take them to a pharmacy that has a give back program where it's safe to dispose of them. Don't throw them down the toilet, because then it gets into the water supply. You don't want to do that.
Gotcha.
All
This is
right.
probably good to know. I'm sure a lot of black folk got some expired medication. I know I do.
Right. Yes, exactly.
All
A lot
kinds
of
of
folks,
Advil,
a lot of folks-
Tylenol from 20 years ago. All
Yeah.
kinds of stuff. They got some BC powder up in there. Okay, I think we lost Dr. Mel.
Oh no.
Wow. So we're on our own, Bree. We lost
Well,
Dr. Mel.
I guess we gotta get into the show.
This is going to be a fantastic show, guys. Dr. Mel is lost. Hopefully she'll be back. She's coming back in. She's coming back. She doesn't know she's gone. So
I'm back.
yes,
Ooh.
yes. We were waiting on you.
All
So we were
right.
waiting
Well,
on you.
good. Well, thank
So-
you for waiting on me.
And we got to
And
get
we
on with the show.
are here to get on with the show. Thank you
Yep.
so much, Bria and Wayne. We're going to see you back in a little bit, because we are going to get into the reason why we're here, which is talking about traveling abroad to get medical care, also known as medical tourism. So each year there are millions of people from the United States that participate in medical tourism. And because of what happened last week in the news that we talked about at the top of the show, with 4 Americans going to Mexico and going for cosmetic surgery, but foul play happened and 2 individuals ended up dying, we decided it was really important to talk about medical tourism, and how to do it safely. And to do that, we have 2 guests with us tonight who are incredible. The first is Jonathan Adelheit. He's the chairman and co-founder of the Medical Tourism Association. He works with governments, hospitals, healthcare providers, insurance companies, and other organizations around the globe to launch successful and sustainable medical travel programs. So welcome, Jonathan. Thanks so much for joining us. And then we also have Josie Harris. She's the curator of Black Bella Spa and Wellness Centers. which specialize in innovative body and skincare solutions. She received surgery in a foreign country, and she's going to share her journey with us. So thank you, Josie, for joining us. So glad you're here.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's get right to it. Jonathan, I'm going to start off with you. Why do people in the United States go to other countries for medical care?
Most of the time, they're doing it for affordability. There's such a huge price differential between the US and other countries. At the same time, having said that, in the majority of cases, they're not sacrificing quality. They're getting equal to care that they would get here. And there's a lot of people that do it to combine the vacation aspect and to be able to travel and immerse themselves in another culture or country.
Great. So what are some of the trends that you've been seeing in medical tourism? Is it on the rise? Where are people going for a lot of these procedures? And what are the things that people are leaving the country for?
It's definitely on the rise, and it's going to continue to grow. There's nothing that's going to stop it because our costs in the US continue to go up, and there's nothing happening or anyone really trying to reduce costs. So I think that you're going to see that price differential really increase. And the other aspect of it too is that I think people are so much more educated today about the fact that they can travel for care and the pricing and the quality. And the reality is, in a way, we've outsourced a lot of our healthcare anyway, so we're used to it. Being here in Florida, if I go try to find a specialist in any category, 75% of them are going to be, people from other countries who went to medical school in other countries, practiced in other countries, and then came here. So I think we're attuned to being treated, and seen by doctors from other countries. A lot of the people are traveling for, it could be cosmetic surgery, dental, orthopedics. We're seeing people travel for fertility, but also people traveling for cancer transplants. And a big emerging trend is pharmaceutical tourism, people traveling for very expensive medication. We're seeing an uptick on that on our consumer site, which is medicaltourism.com.
Great. Thanks for that overview. So, the headlines, right? What happened in Mexico? People might be concerned for safety reasons. Is it safe to travel outside the country, especially obviously to Mexico, since that was where this incident happened? What would you say around analyzing that incident and to people in general about is it safe to go to another country for medical care?
So it's definitely safe to go to another country for medical care. I think what's very important is that if you're thinking about getting care somewhere else, that you really do your due diligence in your research. You make sure you're going to, an accredited clinic or hospital, the doctor's accredited, work with we call them medical tourism facilitators, but think of it as like an insurance agent, an agency who's certified and credible, who, will help guide you in that process. Sometimes people make very poor decisions and they go online and they try to do their own research and they don't really vet who they're going with. And some people make a decision of going for the cheapest care possible. And I think that's, a big mistake. You need to go with quality, start with the quality and then look at the affordability. And also, go to safe places. I certainly wouldn't be going, if I don't know what is our most unsafe city here in the US, but if we took that most unsafe city and took the most dangerous neighborhood in the city, I wouldn't I wouldn't recommend anybody travel there for a medical procedure, even if the cost was super affordable. And I think the same thing goes for Mexico. You shouldn't be traveling to unsafe places. And this is a place where there's a lot of violence, and Department of State actually had a wording that wasn't like, be careful. It was, do not travel here, because of the activity. And so, I think that people need to pay attention to what the Department of State says. There are safe places to go in Mexico for medical tourism. When you also go along those border towns versus you get on a plane, you can go to Mexico City, you can go to Cancun, you can go to Puerto Vallarta, but at the border cities also, there could be issues there. there could be quality providers, but there's a lot of places that they're just trying to cater to the cross-border traffic that's crossing the border between Texas and California, and it's almost like the Wild West. And
so I think so. It sounds like there are a couple of things, obviously, to consider. There's the quality piece, and then there's the location, like you said. And just because one place in Mexico isn't safe doesn't mean you can generalize to the whole country. Just like, there's certainly unsafe places in the United States. You can't generalize that to the whole country. I want to bring Josie in because you talked about vetting and researching. And I'm gonna get back to you. So hold off on. I'm gonna ask you how to figure out quality a little bit later. But I want to get Josie in to say, ask you first of all, what surgery did you have, and in what part of the world?
Sure. So I am a proponent of cosmetic surgery. So I've had surgery stateside, liposuction a couple of times, and some reconstructive foot work, cosmetic work here in the States. But I actually chose to do my rhinoplasty in Pasig City, Manila. And it was interesting because I was also traveling in the region to do some other business for a wellness center and training. But the reason that I chose the surgeon that I chose was because of his techniques. It's interesting because I am a post-surgery specialist now, and I consult with clients before, during, and after their surgical journeys. And many of the American consumers do choose to seek out certain surgeons because of their work. The technique is a lot more advanced in different countries, and it's in many cases it's not always price driven because the total cost of ownership is equivalent to having surgery stateside. But many people are seeking out surgery abroad for the actual surgeon's work. And it's very different from a lot of stateside surgeons' methods and methodology. So I went to Manila for that surgeon's work, what he could do with the Filipino nose, skin type, and everything else.
Got it. I just want everybody to be clear. Could you define what rhinoplasty is?
Sure, nose job. So
Okay.
I did a Gore-Tex implant, harvested some cartilage from my ear. Prior to this, I don't know if I sent you my before and after picture, but it was very West African. Now I'm more like Northern African. So
All right. All right. Well, good. Thanks for breaking that down for us. So how did you go about figuring out, does this practice adhere to other than the work, the quality of the, well, I'm trying to say for the word quality, but the appearance of the work, the before and after pictures that attracted you to him and his methodologies. How did you figure out, is there quality? Will I be safe medically, specifically in terms of being free from infection, the standards of sterilization that they use, those other kinds of things that, are very closely policed here in the United States, but may or may not be in other places. So how did you figure that out?
My process was not as advanced, and I don't think it was as much information as it is now. This was in 2016. The industry has grown rapidly in terms of like surgery abroad and what the layman has access to. So it was a referral from a friend. And I literally just checked with that Department of Health in Pasig City, Manila to see, it's kind of morbid, but did he have any infections and deaths? That was really what I had to go off of. In addition to that, I shadowed 3 of his patients, 2 of them while they were pre-surgery, when they recovered from surgery. And I mean, literally immediately after surgery, I was having conversations with those people. So it was just like boots on the ground. I wanted to know what his process was like, what his clinic was like from people who had been there. So it was really tactile. And then when I went to visit him while I was in Pasig City, Manila, I really felt out his clinic, his space, how he was operating. And that was pretty much, I was sold once I, met with him in person, he and his wife.
Did you make 2 separate trips, or you went, you evaluated it, and then you stayed for the surgery?
Yeah, I went, evaluated, stayed for the surgery. And I was there for about 3 weeks. And that was another thing. I liked how he did his business in accordance to the local government and regulatory. Everything had like a government seal. It was a process where I had to be released to fly and return home. And I've really enjoyed having all of those little stop gaps. And with Jonathan's mention, anytime I travel abroad, especially for a country where I don't know kind of that economy and how that country kind of moves and breathes, I always check in with the Department of State. So I had a little bit of intelligence about how the president of Manila was running their travel industry and security and things of that sort too. So I felt I was really confident because it was a lot of movement in that area in terms of attracting outside money and tourism.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. So Jonathan, I wanted to get back to you. What are the tools that people can use in terms of understanding the quality of care, of medical care that they'll receive based upon their chosen location and the chosen practice that they're going to go to?
Well, first thing I just want to say to Josie, great job on your due diligence. I think, most people wouldn't call like the Department of Health locally. I think everybody should talk to, multiple patients that have been, done the work for the doctor to hear about the positives, the negatives, the actual experience. So I think you definitely, I think you did a deeper dive and you seem obviously, I think, more confident than most patients to push and to look for those things. I think when you're looking at quality is, and everybody is different, in what you're looking for, but does that doctor, what is his credentials? Where do you go to school? Where has he practiced? What advanced maybe CMEs or courses that he's taken? Because some doctors are constantly taking courses from medical schools and doing other things where you can kind of track their kind of commitment to their practice. If it's at a clinic or hospital, who accredits that organization? Is it the local government? Is there an international accreditation? There's a lot of medical tourists going to hospitals that are, for example, Joint Commission International accredited, JCI, and Joint Commission is the main accreditor here in the US. Other things, there's an organization called Global Healthcare Accreditation that accredits hospitals and clinics specifically for medical travel. So I would also ask that doctor, how many medical procedures have you performed in this area? I think that's very informative. With a lot of these doctors, it's not like you're going to an average doctor. You're going to like one of the top doctors in that country who has that expertise. And like Josie had shared, there's a lot of, back in the day, the US used to be it, right? This is be the place and where we have the latest techniques. And the reality is there's hundreds of thousands of people from overseas who come to the US because of the quality. Right. At the end of the day, we're not just the only place that has quality healthcare. There's techniques, surgical techniques being perfected all around the world. There's, medical technology, pharmaceuticals being developed all over the world. And so we just don't have, that complete ownership of quality. And also we train people and then they go back to the country they're from. So I was working in the country of Jordan in medical tourism, and I'm out at a dinner with the doctors from this one hospital, and they're all telling me where they went. And it's like, oh, I practice at, Johns Hopkins. I practice at Cleveland Clinic. And I was really blown away because it was all, doctors who, practice at top hospitals.
Who had trained here.
But trained abroad. So you might be surprised. For example, like in Colombia, there's a top fertility clinic, and the doctor, went to Yale Medical School. I just would never have guessed. And, you're going to pay like 80% less, to go through fertility at that clinic in Colombia with a top Yale doctor, where in the US, instead of like 10,000, you might have to pay like 50 or 70,000 for that treatment.
Yeah. So I think those you were saying several things there. And actually, those are some of the things I actually wrote a book called Excuse Me, Doctor. I've got what? Taking ownership of your health and making healthcare work for you. And that's where the name of the show comes from. And I talk in there about how to evaluate a doctor, right? And a lot of the things, as you were saying, in terms of their accreditations, how many procedures like that they've performed, getting a feel for them, meeting them ahead of time, interviewing, certain questions that you can ask them, a lot of which you just mentioned. So I think basically what you're saying, it's the same whether it's here in the United States versus abroad. Um, and I wanted to also find out, Josie, how was your experience when it was all said and done?
My experience was amazing. So I was super confident with this surgeon, so confident that when I did decide to move forward with my procedure, he asked me for a photo of an example of what I would like to have. And I told him I don't work here. I would like for you to look at my face, create something that is, in that triangle of beauty and it looks natural for me. And I'm still happy with my results. And when I returned stateside, I did visit 2 other local well-known surgeons and have my procedure inspected. So I had it assessed after, just to be sure I wasn't at risk for any infection or anything of that sort. And one of the surgeons, he was astounded. He told me that he came in ready to give me his "Who told you to leave the country" speech. But when he saw the work, he was just like astounded. And he asked me, how did I even find the surgeon? So I'm
Okay.
pretty pleased with the work. But I wanted to add something huge, if I may. Is it okay?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So with me being specifically a post-surgery care specialist, I feel like we're in the middle of this, like, since COVID happened, this major surgical explosion. Like, clients who've been with me for 7 and 8 years who would never have had surgery are now going for like the gusto
Mm.
BBLs. They're like, it's becoming like so
And BBLs,
acceptable.
define BBLs.
The Brazilian butt lift is when you take the
Okay.
fat from the parts of your body where you don't want it,
Mhm.
and then you contour it into your breast, or you can do it into your buttocks, just fat grafting and contouring and creating a
Right.
desired silhouette, right? One of the things that I see happen many, many times is, just to Jonathan's point, you will have, and this is especially with younger women, where they see a special, they think they can go abroad to Dominican Republic or another country and get a surgery cheap, inexpensive, and they're going there to save money, but they don't prepare for and understand the total cost of ownership.
Right.
So they don't understand they need post-surgery care. Some of them don't even have enough for housing and food. They're like calling home asking for wires. They don't understand they're going to need extra blood work, all these other add-ons that happen when they're in Cali, Colombia, or wherever else. And then when they return home, they're in an acute state of pain because the liposuction abroad is not like the 6-liter liposuction that we get here in Maryland. It's very aggressive, and they are not prepared for recovery at all. So they end
Mhm.
up with seromas, infections, and all these other things. Um,
Right.
Now, another layer of it is I'm seeing many doctors that are not specifically plastic surgical specialists. They didn't study in plastics. They're not really keen on the aesthetics of it, but they have the licensure to buy a lipo machine. And they're like, hey,
Mhm.
all this money flying around. I see podiatrists, geriatric specialists, all these different
Mhm.
MDs now practicing on people, just so it's all this botched
Right.
surgery happening too. And this is stateside. This isn't,
Mhm.
out of the country. So
But
this
I
is,
I think the potential for it is that it can happen anywhere if
yes.
there's that, advertising and aggressive marketing around, I can do it for half the price, but they don't necessarily have the training and experience.
So to you guys' point, it's about having the skill set to be able to vet the surgeon and understanding maybe a short list of questions that should be asked. Um, I think that's huge. And it's income tax time. So right now is really interesting. It's busy,
Prime
busy.
time. Yeah.
Mhm.
So you actually jumped ahead. That was one of the questions I was gonna ask you, or what are some of the common mistakes people make? So thank you for bringing that up, and I guess I would throw it right back to Jonathan. What are some of the mistakes that you see people making, if there are
Uh,
any that you have to add to what Josie mentioned?
I think she covered it really well. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's just, choosing something online and not asking the questions, not knowing, or just someone unfortunately just being a great salesperson. And so you don't
Mhm.
really ask the questions, or think of the questions. And then Dr. Mel, for what you're saying, the book you wrote and then the concept of the show is, I feel everybody needs to be empowered to ask the right questions. And I feel like everyone also should have a right to like a second and third opinion for any diagnosis. And I have just seen, just here locally, our OBGYN recommended my wife to see a fertility doctor in Boca Raton, Florida. And that guy was a snake oil salesman. Just, you got killer cells, and I got this magic juice I'm going to give you, and let's roll. And then got a second opinion from there, and found out it was not even true what he said, and there's something totally different. I think that what's unfortunate is I think a lot of us have been trained or programmed that wherever our doctor tells us to go see, we don't ask questions. Or if we just find a specialist, it doesn't matter whether it's medical tourism or receiving urological care, we just believe everything that they say. And I think people should get that second or third opinion, so that then at the end of the day, they just become more informed. And I think you should really focus on comparing doctors. And it's, for some people, it's very uncomfortable, but I think it's a process you'll get through. And then once you do, you can become really good at evaluating it. And we're all going to need it in our lives, for ourselves, for our family members. Where did this guy go to school? How many procedures did he do? What are the accreditations? What's the continuing education? Absolutely. We see people who go have problems and they never talk to patients who have been to that doctor. If the doctor won't give you patient, testimonials, meaning not just testimonials, but here are the phone numbers of some of the people just like you from your country that have been there, I would say that's a red flag, because typically, patients like Josie, they'll come back, and they're very happy, and they're happy to talk to other people and share the experience and be very honest with them.
Yes, exactly. And I have learned so much from talking to both of you, and hopefully our audience has too, and that they're ready with questions. So I'm going to ask Wayne and Bria to come on back in to the studio and see what's going on in the chat, see if there are questions out there that people want to know for Josie and Jonathan. And
Bree, you want to start? Hold on 1 second. The guest has muted herself. Bree, you muted. Okay. You're muted. Okay, I'll start. So we have a question from our super one of our super listeners and watchers, viewers, Yvonne, and she has several things to say, but this one struck me. Yvonne Smith writes, do U.S. doctors ever refer people abroad? Have you heard of it?
It's rare, but we have heard it where somebody's looking for something very specialized and it's not available in the U.S. or there isn't the expertise in the U.S.
Gotcha. Can y'all hear me now?
Yes.
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 Okay, great. I also have a question. How are beauty standards affecting medical tourism?
You gotta go,
would you like to take that, Josie? Yeah.
I thought Josie. I saw Josie, but I
would
thought
say
it's
making it a very lucrative field. From filters online to, I mean, it's in the favor of augmentation right now. It's literally spoon feeding us the "you could look better" syndrome, and we are eating it up in America.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I think it becomes challenging because you look at everyone and everyone is beautiful and they have no imperfections, and and whether it's they've had surgery or they're using their filters on their phone and their apps. And so there's this feeling that we need to be perfect, and we don't like the way we look ourselves. And it's tough. I couldn't imagine being a teenager today, growing up today with that, kind of pressure. And one thing I think that's very important when it comes to, like, if you're traveling for medical tourism for cosmetic, is, talk to a mental health professional. The clinics are supposed to do this too, because there's a lot of things where people are very unhappy after their cosmetic procedure because they had totally unrealistic expectations and they think they're going to look like, exactly like, Kim Kardashian or someone else that they really like. And some people, the reality is they need the mental counseling because, we've seen people who they've gone for surgery and then they've gone to like 10 reconstructive doctors and they keep moving around chasing this dream that's not going to happen. And I think that in of itself is a challenge.
I think we know a very famous example of that, Michael Jackson, who had multiple procedures, which ended up destroying the cartilage in his nose, to your point. So, yeah, I think it's really important that people have realistic expectations of what can be accomplished.
Yeah, I think we have even more recent examples of that. If you look in hip hop, with Lil Kim and a few other female hip hop stars. But we have a question from Diza from California, asks if medical insurance covers any of these procedures.
Great question.
A lot of times the medical insurance will cover it, or a large percentage of it, although the insurers don't talk about it. The problem is the insurance companies aren't motivated for you to travel because they make money if you don't save money in reality. And so you'll still have to pay your airfare, your hotel, if you have deductibles or copays. So there's not necessarily incentive. There's some self-funded employers who are paying for the coverage for their own employees, where they'll actually waive your deductible, your co-insurance, pay for everything for you and a loved one to travel abroad, and even cut you a check.
And I would imagine it depends upon whether the procedure that you're getting or not is quote unquote deemed medically necessary. So, for example, some fertility treatments are considered medically necessary, but a fat redistribution surgery might not be medically necessary. So I think that would also be another consideration.
Yes. And on the dental side, most dental insurance policies, for example, should allow you to try. They don't market it, but allow you to travel to get your dental work done. And I think everybody should look at that. I had a family member who they were quoted $60,000 in Palm Beach Gardens for veneers, and they got it from the top dentist in Costa Rica for $15,000. And the material was actually better and would last twice as long. So I think that dental work is so expensive now in the US, and I see a lot of heartbreaking stories of people who they don't get the implants, they don't get the veneers, a lot of times, they have their teeth pulled, but there's no replacement. And then there's that stress of the look of how you feel about yourself. And people just don't know that, for 50 to 90% less, you can, get that same work done overseas.
Great.
So kind of on the same wavelength around like money and everything, I have a question from Chanel Jones. And it says, so is money and the lack of access to health care in the US the main driver in the increase of medical tourism, or are there other factors?
Yeah, I think Josie touched on that. Josie, you want to reiterate some of the things you said?
Yeah, sure. I would think it's a combination of things because just as Jonathan has outlined, many times people are traveling for pharmaceuticals. They're going for insulin and things of that sort that you could never buy on the open market here. But then some people are electively choosing to go to a certain place for a certain aesthetic, a certain surgeon. And then again, sometimes the savings is an illusion. People think I'm going to go to this country and get this surgery for $5,000, whereas it might be $20,000 here. But when you do the loaded cost, you're at the recovery house for 2 weeks. You have to eat for 2 weeks. You have to get the garments. You have to pay every person that comes to the house. You've spent $18,900. So it's like, did you save any money? So the loaded cost of things, I feel like it's across the board. Everyone's reasoning is sometimes a bit different.
Right. And that comprehensive view, understanding the all-in costs, like you said, for traveling outside the country. Yeah.
One big thing I didn't say in terms of the different methodologies and processes when we talk about the surgeries is what's legally allowed. that is one big reason a lot of people are traveling. And that's a huge factor, because I think I touched on it earlier. In Maryland, we can only take out 6 liters of fat. In Pennsylvania, I want to say it's 8 liters of fat. Every state is different. But when you leave this country, many times that rule does not exist. So you have people who have a lot more subcutaneous fat and they want it all out in one go. Whereas an American doctor is going to tell you, you need to do around 1 surgery to be safe. You recover, come back in 12 months, we'll do round 2, and so on and so on. So a lot of people are traveling for that reason with surgery as well. And stateside, you generally will not get liposuction and a tummy tuck and a chin lipo and a fat transfer and all of these and your veneers at one time. You go to Dominican Republic or Cali, Colombia, you're going to come back like Nicole Murphy. You're a whole new woman. So in one surgery, and it's a lot more risks involved, but that's one of the reasons that a lot of people do it. They're like, I only want to do this one time, off like a Band-Aid, and it's very dangerous.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And also too, if you also have underlying health conditions. So that's another thing. If you have high blood pressure or diabetes, it's not safe for you to get all those. It's not safe, period, for you to get all that at one time. But it's even more high risk if you have underlying health conditions as well.
That brings us to a question by Mario James Frazier. What's the mortality rate of U.S. surgeries versus overseas procedures? Which is higher?
Yeah. Jonathan, do you have any statistics on that?
You know, that's really difficult, because it's difficult to even tell in the US. And then sometimes people will look at, just to give you an example of the US, is they'll look at one place versus another. But if a hospital has an ICU, for example, in an ER, they're going to have a higher mortality rate than an outpatient center or ambulatory surgical center. So there's going to be, so the same answer is going to be abroad. There's going to be places that have lower or equal mortality, and there's going to be places that have higher mortality. And if you go to the cheapest places that aren't quality, don't have the accreditation, don't have the credentialed doctors, that same thing is going to happen as if you go to the bad doctor here in Miami.
Yeah,
but there's no way to really truly track that, and there's still a lack of transparency across healthcare in that area.
Yeah, and to your point, for example, if there's a procedure done at an outpatient surgery center and there's a complication that develops and that person then goes to a hospital and dies in the hospital, it may or may not be attributed to that outpatient surgery center. So that's one of the reasons why it's difficult, which I think goes back to a lot of what we were talking about before. How do you do your thorough and proper due diligence up front to try to get to some of these difficult to get statistics? And I think we heard some good tactics here tonight. Any other questions?
Yeah, we are in the lightning round, and this question is from Rhoda Lawrence to Josie. How big is the recovery business? I've seen many influencers pushing entrepreneurs to launch recovery service businesses in their homes and hotels.
So the recovery business is huge. The recovery business is as risky as the surgical business. I feel like surgery is only 25% of the journey. What you do after you get off of that table determines everything. And everyone wants a piece of the pie. Obviously, we can't pretend to be plastic surgeons. So what we do is pretend to be massage therapists, lymphedema therapists, and post-surgery specialists. And you have people who are in acute pain. They've had diastasis muscle repair. They have sutures, all these really, really traumatic surgeries. And people who will have you in their home, in the back of a salon, I've seen them in the back of a little mini truck, like, we'll come to you, pushing, prodding, pressing on these people with injury. I mean, it's medically performed, but it's an acute injury, and they do not understand manual lymphatic drainage. They don't understand sanitation. You have people who will take a wooden dowel and stick it into your liposuction suture and open it up in order to squeeze manually the fluid out of your tissue. So it is a very risky business. Just like you vet your doctor, you should vet your post-surgery partner. Everyone is governed by the Department of Health. If I see your name online and you are Boom Boom Keisha post-op, it's not going to work out. I need your first and last name, just like we can find Dr. Mel in the Department of Health. You should be able to find your post-surgery partner in the Department of Health. They must be licensed. They have to have certifications. Did they go, just as you guys said, get the continuing education? Are they running a sanitary facility? There is just so much that I could say about this. I've had people come back with seromas, infections, people sticking Amazon syringes in people to draw fluid off, giving them infections and things like that, rupturing internal incisions. It's
That's
a lot.
scary. That is very scary. That sounds like a whole nother show. Like, we need to devote a show
surgery
to that.
And now you come here and someone, you know, it's a lot.
Yeah. Well, are we still in the lightning round, or do we need to wrap it up?
We have one more, and it's a statement from a great friend of the show. This is a statement from Richard Goodjoy. He's a physician in Georgia, right? Correct, Doctor?
In the great state of Georgia, yes.
In the great state of Georgia, he says it is important for patients to let their PCP know they are going out of the country to get a procedure. So that way, when they return stateside, they can be checked out post-operatively. I know a patient who have complications and require hospitalizations, which will increase the cost. I know many patients who have complications and require hospitalizations, which will increase the cost to the patient. So that's from the good doctor, Richard.
Thank you, Dr. Goodjoy.
Thank you.
Always make sure your PCP knows you have your visit scheduled before you leave and when you come back, so that they can round out your experience and make sure you're okay. Thank you all so much. I think it's time that I have to wrap up. You guys were fantastic. Thank you to Josie Harris. Thank you to Jonathan Edelheit. We really appreciate you all being on. I think we've learned so much about how to do your due diligence if you're thinking about going out of the country for a medical procedure. And we've had some invaluable information here tonight. So I just have to wrap up, as I always do, by making sure that you, my Be Health Empowered family, know about a special research study that's happening at Howard University called the COVID Resilience Research Study. It's basically, how did you fare during the pandemic? You just have to fill out 2 surveys. That's all that's required. And you could be compensated $100 for your time in doing that. And if you have any interest in doing it at all, please reach out to Dana Harvey. And her email is danaharveyresearch@gmail.com. That's Dana, D-A-N-A, Harvey, Harvey, research@gmail.com. Well, that's it for us. Thank you so much for tuning in again. And I forgot to thank you all, my audience, for those fantastic questions that you asked and for the excellent comments that were made. We're going to be back here next week. And until then, remember, be wise, be well, and be health empowered. Thanks for joining.
They invited me. They still don't know. I hooked up with Dave 3 days ago. He'll start coughing tomorrow. And I bet in 10 days he'll be on a ventilator. Now his wife, she's not vaccinated because she thinks it'll prevent her from being pregnant. But what they don't know is that I can decrease sperm count. Sorry, Dave. Good luck with that.